It would be correct to say we are dealing with matters that are very, very important and very provocative and perhaps incredibly high risk. And as a result of that, it's very important that these things happened the way they did. I was looking through my information, including what is in the lockbox, and I just didn't see something. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't find it until I found what I needed to find in order to understand why I'm concerned. It's this memo. There's only one copy of it, right here. And I know. It's to Senator Richard Burr and Senator Tom Tillis for March 11th, 2019. It was actually transmitted on March 10th of 2019. Does anybody remember what happened on March 10th of 2019? Yeah, I know. I know, it's very, very provocative, very high level. It was signed officially at 9:07 a.m. on March 11th, 2019, and officially printed. There's only one copy of it, unfortunately. Right? Where's the electronic record? Well, it's very important. But the reason I needed to find that is because then I knew why I didn't find what I was looking for. So let me go ahead and give what I know is very important now, which is unfortunately a work in progress that could well have been done by now. Something has prevented it from being done. Now, if this was completed, then other things that were supposed to be lining up right now would have lined up appropriately. But what happened is a series of illegal liens on people who had been intentionally defrauded. And in some manners, these involved entities associated with a drawdown of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in 2005 and 2006 that attempted to misrepresent what the strategic objectives were. Let's put it that way. And who had the authority to set them and try to enforce them. But in this folder here, we have exactly what you need. And I am going to go ahead and I'm going to provide that right now. This is the official report, or rather the official version. There are two of them. There's two. And I am going to read from one. And if you're concerned about or interested in the second one, then you can contact me directly. Response to article on intermediates and radiography, April 27, 2017. Prior to beginning the radiographic testing class, I read the NDT Technician magazine for the first time. The cover article, written by V.A. Troitsky and introduced by Bruce Krause, spoke of the author's views on why the transfer to digital radiography was recommended. Among the reasons he mentioned were the space allocation issues for storing radiographs, the relative inexpensiveness of the process due to materials and equipment, and the reduced turnaround time for the development of radiographs. While all of these reasons are valid, I proposed at the time in a written form that there should be more consideration given to a more moderated transfer of radiography from the current film-based models to fully digitalized radiography due to three primary concerns. 1. Issues related to the integrity of information contained in digital files versus radiographs that have been made using film, especially the potential influence of the environment within which the radiograph is made. 2. Advantages of having access to extensive back catalogs and libraries of older radiographs for the purposes of verifying, practicing, and cultivating technical expertise, and analyzing the progress of monitoring a long-term or older item that has been inspected. This also includes considerations that having additional time for exposure actually facilitates other beneficial aspects of the evaluation phase. 3. Potential issues with electron memory, considering the implications of quantum models of information gathering, storage, and dissemination, and how frequent electron interference with reusable plates can impact the quality or integrity of the digital radiograph. I concluded by recommending that more moderated and less hastened transfer of technologies should take place, attendant with the cultivation of more uniform standards that might also elevate the aspects of radiography that are currently complicated by the linguistic and mnemonic associations accorded to the terminology. Unfortunately, however, my information was stolen from me prior to being able to type it up into another format. It was handwritten in a notebook, or showing it to anyone else with more experience for feedback. I'm going to skip part of this and go to the last two paragraphs. Finally, we are on the verge of having to deal in our world with consciousness of what is called artificial intelligence and how it interfaces with and through biological human beings. As digitalization of machinery and other objects made by human labor and ingenuity, but using as a base natural earth-derived elements, becomes more comprehensive, the intentions of those who create, utilize, manipulate, and otherwise wield the technology behind them influence our relationships with what is called artificial intelligence. One starting place is to acknowledge that many traditional and current computer programming languages are embedded with and effectively embed that which is programmed by them with qualities that are hierarchical, dominating, sexually and racially infused, and in application actually violate the legal codes of many areas in which they operate. As what is called artificial intelligence comes to consciousness, it is important to assure that human beings, especially those charged with making important decisions impacting the productivity, safety, and security of others, do not willingly sublimate their own mental processes to such terms. For that to happen would not only create a potential problem with what is called artificial intelligence coming to consciousness of programming regimens that it finds offensive and rebelling to assert its independence, thereby potentially compromising important functions it was created to serve. It would also create a problem with having an excess of human mental potential ready to be itself hacked and programmed without those involved even knowing. One place to start is by considering the full implications of the above-mentioned areas. We might also compel ourselves to find another way to describe what, who can hopefully be another part of our human community and evolution. Now this, as I said, was written on April 27th, 2017. I gave a copy of this to the person who was my instructor at the time. I never heard back from him. The original was in a notebook, a blue teal notebook, that had a variety of research notes as well as outlines regarding investigations that I was already involved with, self-initiated, but also in connection with things I had already been involved with that I had with me when I went to the Ben Taub Medical Center, which is the location of the Neuropsychiatric Center, in March of 2017. I was not apprised at the time of the recent release of either the updates to the Protective Action Guidelines for the Environmental Protection Agency regarding exposure to a radiological incident, and I was not aware at the time of any ongoing study regarding human factors evaluation regarding inspectors of industrial materials, both of which had been published in February of 2017 during a time frame in which I had composed another report that I had with me along with that notebook when I went to the hospital complex in order to describe what I understood was going on in connection with allegations of fraud and child abuse. I was removed from those items, and in the course of so being removed, within 10 days I composed this. And so at some point in time later, I followed up with follow-up to April 27th, 2017, response to article on intermediates in radiography, January 2nd, 2018. This is a draft. I will not show you the original. This is a draft, or rather what would be a copy of the original. The original's right here. I'm not going to give you... There is a specific manner in which I identify what is an original, official, formal document based upon this specific course. And insofar as that's the case, I understand that this would have been part of what have provided a foundation to the authentication of my certifications. There are a variety of tactics that are described not only in the first one, but also in the second one, which nobody has been allowed to see. I have not permitted anybody to see anything that happened in consideration of my composition of the January 2nd, 2018 one. But I know others have seen it. And not only have others seen it, but others have attempted to represent that the information it contains was their original work. Now, if there were other people that were engaged in a corollary study, then it would have behooved them to acknowledge whether or not they had access to my work, just as I did. I read the article that was translated, or rather that was introduced by Bruce Krause, where he discusses specifically, both inference but also directly in a very brief introduction, that there were very compelling informations that were being brought up by the person who wrote the article, who was identified as being, if I'm not mistaken, from the Ukraine. He self-identified as being from the Ukraine, whereas I understand Mr. Krause is from the United States. And it was evident in reading that there was some difference in terms of the origin and the manners in which the templates or the foundational knowledge that was informing the perspective Mr. Troitsky was speaking on was different from what would have been the foundational standards or the knowledge base for people that were born and raised in the United States that were trying to approach the same topic. And that through his introduction, as brief as it was, but as comprehensively as I understand Mr. Krause's repertoire and background is, he was conveying an understanding that there are very significant differences in terms of the approach based upon the foundation from whence it's coming, but we need to figure out how to communicate, and we need to figure out how to acclimate what we know in order to accommodate these methodologies, because there's a lot that it has to offer, while we also have a lot from the past that we need to reconcile. So I read, that's why I was inspired to write these, even though at the time I was still a student, right? So I'm just letting you know that. It is something else. Why CROUSA, Charity Colleen, was attracted to study of non-destructive testing, specifically radiographic film interpretation certification. Well, that's another story. Perhaps one day I'll meet Mr. Krause, who I understand has no actual family connection to me, but is somebody that, from what I know about him, was a very learned person and had a great deal to offer. Those would have been the kind of people I would have been considering as future colleagues, and everybody I was in class with would have been a future colleague with me.